no interest in ufology, they interact with somebody who has an interest in that topic or says something happened to them, and then it's almost like it's contagious. Then all of a sudden they start having experience.
Beginning in late June and into early July 1984, the tiny township of Turkey Creek experienced a wave of UFO sightings that left citizens and authorities desperate for answers. Farmers, motorists, and locals all around the area were sighting these strange objects. Everything came to a head one evening when an oval-shaped craft the size of a football field hovered above the town's roadhouse. More than 200 people, including members of the nearby Aboriginal camp, came out to look, noted one Mrs. Frances Wainwright, co-owner of the local petrol station. We were all scared out of our wits. The thing was blazing with lights so bright they made my head ache, she told reporter John Pinckney. It seemed to be swathed in a kind of mist. Our first clue that something strange was going on came at about 10 p.m., when the freezer began to rattle violently. Thinking it could be an earthquake, I ran outside with my husband Paul. Then we saw this gigantic, dazzling object emerging from behind the hill. Wainwright claims that they immediately sensed that the craft, or whomever was piloting it, was aware of them. What disturbed us most was that it seemed to be aware of the roadhouse. It hovered directly overhead and stayed for about 10 minutes. Curiously, this was not the strangest thing that the Wainwrights experienced that week. John Pinckney investigated the sightings and published his findings in an issue of Pix-People magazine. In speaking to the Wainwrights, he discovered that they had experienced something even more bizarre earlier that week, which they suspected might be related to the UFO sighted over their property. It involved their 2-year-old daughter, Cassandra. In the week before the UFO appeared, Cassandra began sleepwalking, something she'd never done before, Frances recalled. It started one morning when we were awoken by the sound of her sobbing and calling out to us. I rushed to her room and found her bed empty. Then I looked outside. There was Cassandra standing in the pouring rain, her nightdress sodden and her hair plastered to her head. Mrs. Wainwright alerted her husband. We brought her inside, dried her, and put her back to bed, and then tried to forget all about it. But the next night, it always happened about 3 a.m., she was out there again. When it happened 3 nights in a row, we locked the doors to keep her in. Curiously, everything changed the night the strange object appeared over their property. After the UFO hovered over our roadhouse, she never sleepwalked again, and that led us to wonder whether her sleep was disturbed by some kind of pre-knowledge. John Pinckney, in his write-up, noted that there seemed to be a consistent strand through so many UFO reports, how the witnesses seemed to connect to the object telepathically. During a 1-hour phone-in program which I conducted for the ABC, many listeners said that they had, quote, known in advance that they were about to experience something unusual. Typical was a schoolteacher who, while walking in the hills with her sister, suddenly felt her flesh prickle. Something prompted both women to look up, whereupon they saw several hat-shaped objects moving across the face of the moon. Another listener told me that, while driving in the country, he was obliged to stop his car to remove a large tree branch blocking the road. Suddenly he noticed lights flashing in a nearby field. Something was sitting there, he said. It was like a multicolored merry-go-round, flashing and rotating, and surrounded by a kind of fog. I drove off as fast as I could. For sure, I have personally covered probably hundreds of cases in which witnesses describe some type of telepathic contact in the presence of UFOs or their occupants. Was the UFO the cause of the Wainwright's daughter's sleepwalking issue, or was it just a weird coincidence? It's interesting that the daughter sleptwalk at 3 a.m. In folklore, the time between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m., or the witching hour, is said to be when the veil between the spiritual and physical worlds is the thinnest. allowing supernatural entities to be at their most powerful and active. Typically, it happens in conjunction with ghosts and haunted house cases, but occasionally it crosses over into ufology. It further makes me wonder if the various phenomenons all stem from the same place. Maybe they are, as Keel believed, connected in some way.
Is there a link between UFOs and sleepwalking and sleep issues? I'd love to know if people who have had UFO encounters or people who claim to have been taken by beings, if they suffer from sleepwalking issues after the fact, or how common is it in people who have had these encounters? I'd love to know that.
It was the early morning hours, June 18th, moving into June 19th, 1996. Colin Cornes, 24, a law student in his fourth year at a London university, was lying on his bed. He liked to sleep on his side. Suddenly he became aware of what he thought was his fridge door being opened and closed. He found this sound most peculiar and began to wonder if perhaps there was someone else in the room. He glanced around and was startled to see his perception of his room change dramatically. To him, the room appeared flat and, quote, not in the right dimensions. The whole room appeared to be, quote, wavering, just like ripples on a still mill pond when you throw a stone in. Everything appeared to be moving. Colin admitted that he became quite frightened and was unsure of what was going on. Just then, a tremendous bright white flash illuminated the whole room, followed by a rush of wind. With that, he found himself unable to move. He tried to move his arms. Nothing. He tried to move his legs. Nothing. He tried to cry out. Nothing. The only thing that seemed capable of moving was his eyes. As he looked around in the darkness of his room, he began to make out 3 or 4 figures standing there. They were at the side of his bed, seemingly staring at him. They were, he estimated, around 3.5 feet tall, wearing what he can only describe as similar to a monk's habit, which came over their heads. He believed the habits to be brown, but given how dark the room was, he wasn't certain. The room was dark, but not dark enough that he couldn't make out features. In fact, he could see these creatures' faces, and they terrified him. They were evil-looking, he told researcher Malcolm Robinson. He noted that their skin seemed to be brownish in color and it appeared to be, quote, scrunched up. He also observed very dark oval eyes. Colin claims that he could clearly see 3 beings, but was sure there was another one, which was just outside of his line of vision. While he could not see it, he could sense its presence. It was at this point that he experienced a very bizarre sensation. His entire life suddenly flashed before him, not unlike the life reviews described in NDE reports. Scenes from his childhood would come and go, and then suddenly everything just stopped, seemingly paused on a vision of his half-sister, Claire. This is when he noticed in the hands of the beings a large silver metallic object. The creature slowly pointed this device at Colin, and it began to move towards his body. By now the terror Colin felt was beyond comprehension. He had never known terror like it, and worse still, he was absolutely powerless to stop it. The device came closer and closer until it was just outside and below his ribcage. Then, with a pain that he had never experienced before, this device was slowly inserted into his body. Colin confided to Robinson that the pain he experienced at this point was, quote, indescribable. It was intense, and all he wanted was for it to stop. But with no compassion from his bedroom captors, the needle-like device was inserted deeper and deeper, until he was certain that he would pass out from the pain. Eventually the device was retracted out of his body, and the pain completely subsided. Seconds later he witnessed the beings walking backwards, like in Rewind, towards the bedroom wall. Somehow they just appeared to melt through it until they could no longer be seen. Just as they were walking backwards towards the wall, there was another explosion of white light, followed by another rush of wind. Colin then found that he could move, and he quickly jumped out of bed, turned on the light, and checked all through his room to see if perhaps someone or something was still lurking. Nothing was there. He immediately looked at his body, and just below his right rib cage, he detected a small red spot where this needle-like device had been. As he examined it, the mark, to his astonishment, slowly faded away until nothing at all could be seen. He began to wonder if another student may have seen or heard something. He walked out of his room towards the outside hall, where he met a fellow student who was sitting staring at his computer. Colin found this to be a little strange, as he had never seen this student up at that time, not before or since. He checked his clock and found that it was around 1:39 a.m. He asked the student if he had seen anything strange, to which the student indicated that he hadn't. Colin returned to his room. He checked it multiple times. No surprise, he did not sleep that night. Another researcher, Gloria Dixon, wondered if anything else had happened at that school, to which Colin insisted that there had been another first-year law student, a girl named Alex, who had told him that she had been having problems at home and had been taken by extraterrestrials in another hall of residence. This had happened prior to Colin's event. However, Colin at the time didn't believe her and thought of her as a, quote, nutcase. Soon after, the girl left the college. Colin was uncertain what became of her after that. Speaking to Robinson, Colin was adamant that he had tried to live a healthy lifestyle. He didn't smoke or use drugs. He had never even taken a headache tablet. He exercised regularly and read often. Since the experience, his health deteriorated noticeably, and he began suffering from neck issues. Robinson was curious if he had any other experience in his personal life. Colin recalled just one. When he was 11 years old, he remembered having this overwhelming sense that a man dressed in black was coming to get him. He was found outside sleepwalking half a mile away from his home, dressed in his pajamas. Malcolm Robinson had been put in touch with Colin in May of 1999 through Gloria Dixon. He conducted an interview with him. He eventually published his report in a 1999 issue of the BUFORA Bulletin. He found Colin's case to be extraordinarily chilling. Colin's experience is not unique, he wrote, but tales like these fill me with horror, should they be true. I have no reason to doubt Colin's testimony. He struck me as a very honest individual, and told his tale with honesty and conviction. Ultimately, Robinson was left searching for answers. Where do experiences like these take us? What can we learn from them? Okay, it's another piece of the ufological jigsaw, but it isn't making any sense. What were they doing in Colin's bedroom? Why were they inserting a needle-like device into his body? Why? 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 All this must mean something, but I'm darned if I know what.
He said that he knew this girl in college that had said that, she had been taken. And it kind of got me wondering if it was possible that maybe that had something to do with it. Because at the time he said that he thought she was nuts. He didn't think anything of that. He didn't think anything of, that such things were real. And I kind of wondered if maybe his experience that happened after might have had something to do with his encounter with this girl and what she told him. Because you find in some of these cases that people who have, no interest in the paranormal, who have no interest in ufology, they interact with somebody who has an interest in that topic or says something happened to them, and then it's almost like it's contagious. Then all of a sudden they start having experiences, and all of a sudden it becomes real. And I thought that was what might be going on in this case. And then he said that he had this experience when he was a kid involving this man in black. Then it kind of made me wonder if he, it was happening throughout his life. Maybe his talking to this girl, maybe it had happened to him in the past. He had forgotten about it, and then after talking to this girl, it brought it back into his life somehow.